else in the Bible you get such insight into the supernatural realm of spiritual conflict. And so he said, don't you realize, that I'm going to return now to fight with the prince of Persia? And when I am gone forth, this comes a little bit of prophecy now. The prince of Grecia shall come. You see, you can't catch God off guard. God already knew that Satan's agenda was to bring onto the front, if he can't do what he wants to with Persia, well, we're going to get Greece to rise up in this situation. And so another demonic prince is coming out to fight and to contend with Gabriel and Michael at this point, and it's identified as Grecia. And then the last verse of Daniel 10, it says, but I will show thee what is noted in Scripture of truth. I'm going to tell you something. There is none, this I still think is Gabriel speaking, there is none that holdeth with me in these things, but Michael, your prince. That doesn't mean it was just the prince of Daniel, but I believe Michael was the archangel that God had designated to have specific jurisdiction over the nation of Israel. Michael, your prince. There's none that's holding with me right now except Michael. And also chapter 1, there should be no division between chapter 10, verse 21, and chapter 11, verse 1. Gabriel still speaking. And I, in the first year of Darius the Mede. Now, who was Darius the Mede? That takes you back to Persia. This is a reflection back to the beginning of the rise of the Medes and Persians, their empire. And I also, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and strengthen him. Remember, I've told you there's no chapter division. So the antecedent here isn't, well, I stood to defend Darius the Mede. No, I stood up to assist Michael, your prince. Let's read this together. You don't have to read it word for word with me, but I just want to read through it one more time. The 21st verse of chapter 10, connecting it without stopping into the first verse of chapter 11. But I will show thee, Daniel, that which is noted in Scripture, the Scripture of truth. There is none that holdeth with me in these things, but Michael, your prince. Also, just like he stood with me here in this situation, I also, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and strengthen him. So these supernatural beings are on the job. And they're making certain that God's purposes are going to be fulfilled, regardless of the agenda that Satan has out there. Doesn't that give you some sense of security? I think it should. Okay, we're right now into Daniel 11. And the angelic interpreter here continues. This is not a vision now, so we're not going to see beasts and weird-looking creatures. Although it's going to go into a period of history which you may not know that much about, and most of which is not going to relate to the question that I was asked. And so I do not intend to go through every verse. I went through every verse back before we got into the book of Revelation. I went verse by verse through the whole book of Daniel. And so I don't feel it's a needed thing here to do tonight, especially since all of Daniel 11 doesn't relate to a specific question concerning the Antichrist. Suffice it for me to just point out a few things along the way. It covers some of the territory which we had seen previously talked about, referred to in the visions of chapter 7 and chapter 8, and in particular the empires of Persia and Greece. In verse 2, of chapter 11, Daniel is told that there's going to be 4 more kings of Persia rise up before a mighty king, verse 3, that's Alexander the Great, is going to stand up, that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And then it talks about how that when he, Alexander the Great, stands up, verse 4, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven. This speaks about those 4 horns again, okay? So while we're not talking specifically about those creatures, the 4 horns, etc., I want you to see it's here. We haven't changed the story any. And from this point on, though, we are no longer going to be concerned about Lysimachus and Cassander, the other 2 of the 4 generals that had split up Alexander's empire around, what was it, 301 BC at the Battle of Ipsus. But we are going to be only concerned, I say we because this was God's concern. Didn't mean other people weren't important. But Daniel had asked a question, what about my people? What's going to be happening to Israel? And you see, the king of the north would be the Seleucid Empire. The king of the south would be the Egyptian Empire. The Seleucids, the south was the Ptolemies. And little Israel was stuck right there in the middle. And it was no man's land as these different opposition battles were fought back and forth. So each empire, the southern Egyptian one and the Seleucid Empire, was trying to gain the ascendancy. And I'm not going to go through all the details of this. As I said, I've done that at times before, and it does make for some interesting discussion and seeing what's going on. By the time we get down to, verse 10, we're talking about the defeat of Antiochus the Great. Now that's the father of Antiochus Epiphanes, which you've heard me refer to before, whom some, if you had Bible, some have showed me Bible notes that suggested that Antiochus Epiphanes was the little horn in Daniel 8, which I hope I have, clearly shown from the conclusion of chapter 8 of Daniel that could not be of the proper interpretation. But when we get to verse 10, we are certainly into the father of that individual. This is the one called Antiochus the Great, and he's opposing Ptolemy the Third. And we go on down. There's a lot of things that's going on, but I wanted to show you something in verse 18. This is still dealing with the father of Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus the Great. And he's still trying to work havoc in Egypt. It says, after this he shall turn his face to the isles, and shall take many, but a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. And without his own reproach he shall cause it to turn upon him. This prince on his own behalf was a Roman consul who forced Antiochus the Great, the father of Antiochus Epiphanes, to withdraw. And actually put the Seleucid Empire owing some tribute back to Rome because of the war expenses that Rome had put out in defeating him. And in verse 19 it says he, Antiochus the Great, doesn't mention him by name here, okay? And so I'm adding that information to you to give you a little bit of a historical context. He shall turn his face toward his own fort and his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. He was out trying to fight some other battles out in the perimeters of his own country out east to gain funds to pay the taxes, okay, to Rome. And it's up there where he's going to be killed. And then in verse 20, you have a brother to Antiochus Epiphanes. I hope this isn't boring you, but you know, I don't know how to say what I'm going to be saying if I don't show you the consistency here of what's being discussed. Because actually, you're going to see this conflict going on and on over this period of time. In verse 20, then shall stand up in his estate, in the place of his father, Antiochus the Great, is going to be a brother of Antiochus Epiphanes. This is Seleucus, the son of Antiochus the Great, is going to stand up in the estate of his father, a raiser of taxes of Rome. See, it doesn't tell you all of that. But this sets the stage for even the Maccabees. This is setting the stage for what's going to be going on and why Antiochus Epiphanes did what he did, even to the Jews. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. He dies. Okay? Actually, it was a friend that he trusted that poisoned him. And he had wanted, this other guy wanted that position. Well, at this point, Antiochus, who is going to be called Epiphanes, he's going to call himself that, which means a revelation of God. Of course, he doesn't mean the true God, he means Zeus, the major Greek god. Remember, this is still a part of the Greek culture, the Grecian Empire, even though it's been split up 4 different ways. And so, Antiochus Epiphanes' father, along with paying taxes to Rome, had to send his son Antiochus to Rome, kind of like a hostage. And now, after his father has died and his brother was assassinated, Rome determines to let Antiochus go back. Antiochus coming back. This man, Antiochus Epiphanes, though he is quite brutal and harsh in his treatment of the Jews, he was doing something very logically for his own benefit. He understood, perhaps better than anybody in the Seleucid Empire, what he was up against in facing Rome. And he knew he had to solidify his kingdom under Greek culture. I mean, it was spread out from eastern Turkey today over to the Indus River, just, you know, like, what is that, Afghanistan and Pakistan over there by India. It was broad, covered a huge territory. And it was all conquered by Alexander the Great, but they all went on under their own auspices and gave taxes and allegiance to whoever was running the government at the time. And Antiochus Epiphanes realized, all right, I've got to do something to make this country, this empire, unified. And the only way, in his mind, I could do that, he would say to himself, was to unify them under Greek culture, which would mean I'd send my men out and they would insist all over the place that all these different parts of my empire, in showing their allegiance to me, would also worship Zeus. That wasn't really a problem for these polytheistic pagans out there, but Antiochus Epiphanes couldn't even begin to imagine the great conflict this would have caused to arise there in Israel. We'll get to that a little bit later. It's in the 11th chapter. It's not spelled out that clearly, but I can tell you where it happens. And so it says here in verse 21 is where now Antiochus Epiphanes takes up his reign. In his estate shall stand up a vile person. I mean, he was corrupt, ruthless, carouser. I mean, everything you'd like to think of. He was a vile person to whom they did not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatterers. Now, some people actually start at this verse as a prophecy concerning the Antichrist. I don't think so. I think that's a little premature. But you see, it's going to be out of the same geographical territory. We're going to learn this. From here on out, we're going to be dealing with the king of the north, his attacks upon the king of the south, Egypt. But throughout the rest of this chapter, the focus is upon what the king of the north is doing. And I'm not going to go into all of this here,